Advisory Panel, first meeting of 2026 of the panel. Apologies for absence. I have got one apology from Councillor Gare, and he's being substituted by Councillor Elliott. Welcome, Peter, this evening. The meeting will be recorded live by HTC, so you need to use your microphones, you know that. Mobile phones, can you put them on silent, switch them off? Better make sure I have. And fire exits, the usual fire exits on the right there, exits into the chamber. The meeting point is the top end of the Mill Hill car park. Are there any declaration?
Sorry, Chair,
Yeah.
if I can,
Yeah.
just if I can, I have written on the sheet, but if I can give Councillor Page, Mrs. Page, apology, she's not very well, so she's unable to make the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. We haven't got a substitute because it was too late to get anyone to come
Okay.
in substitute. Thank you.
Well, sure you're here, so you'll make up for it. Yeah. Okay,
Thanks for that. No declarations of interest then. Right. So you've got circulated, we should have on the table the draft minutes of the last meeting of the 9th of December. We're just looking at those from a point of view of accuracy. And we need to look at the minutes of the open part of the meeting and then the minutes of the closed part. So can we do the minutes of the open part first? Councillor King.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, just go back to your last point, declaration of interest. If we're going to be talking about land south of Gartree Road, that covers my county division of Gartree. And so just make that, it's just a personal interest really. Just in terms of the minutes, I'm happy with them, but there are a number of points in the minutes where we said further information to be followed or further information to be obtained or queries have been raised, but we've got no further updates on that. And I just think it's really important that for audit purposes and tracking these things, that if a query, where it says we're going to follow up or something's going to be clarified, then can we have an update in either included as part of the minutes to say we've got that update or clarification, or it's then brought onto this agenda under what you would describe as matters arising from the minutes. I think it should be. Otherwise, these clarification points and other things, I feel, will get lost or have been lost previously, and we haven't been keeping track of them. So I think it is really important, if given where we are, that does happen if it isn't happening already. Thank you.
Okay. So if you want to raise any particular ones, we'll ask the director to either respond to those or to take them away, and I will ensure we get a note on them. The one on the NPPF, which, if you remember, has literally been published, was it the day or within days of the last meeting? We're still, obviously it's a long consultation, so there will be a response, and we're still looking at the best way to do that. The officers are working, but the problem is the local plan is the priority. So, but we will be responding on the issue of the national planning policy framework, and we'll ensure. Well, I've suggested that we do an update to this panel with the key messages. But what we are going to do, obviously, is focus on the bits that affect this district. Rather than, there's so much in it. It's one of the biggest changes to the planning system for years. So there's lots of stuff in there that doesn't affect the district, like green belt and so on. So we don't have any. So yeah, we will be focusing, the officers will be focusing on the bits in the NPPF that affect local planning in this area. Do you want to, are there any other particular ones that you want to highlight, Councillor King?
Well, obviously the paragraphs aren't numbered, but there are various points where it says further clarification being sought, further clarification, so all I'm really asking is, if we've been told that further clarification is going to be obtained or further information is going to be circulated, that they're regarded as action points and they should be recorded as action points, and that we should be then noting whether that's actually happening. As you just said, it may be some time before that's happening, but then we've actually got a running list of what are the action points that are going to be actioned, if I can put it like that. So that when it comes to it later on, we know what is still outstanding or not, as the case may be.
Okay. Yeah.
So we do have an internal list that Dem Services keep for action. So we're keeping an eye on it. But if you would like us to include that action list within the minutes, that's absolutely fine. It's something we can take away.
My personal view as a member is we need to be as transparent and open as possible.
For sure.
At the end of the day, we're here serving taxpayers. And so I think we should have a list, a running list of these points of clarification that are going to, or further information or whatever it is, so that everyone's clear about what's going to come later or not, as the case may be. I don't think that's should be any great problem for any of them.
Absolutely.
It's not meant as a criticism.
No, absolutely. I just wanted to let you know we are keeping an eye on it.
Yeah. No, I know you are. I'm just trying to improve the process and make sure that we're all clear that these things are happening, and what, and also, if there's a date when it was raised, then we know how long it is since the matter was raised. Now, I personally, I think that's quite helpful. But anyway, that everyone else may not agree with that, but that's what I wanted to say, Chair. And further to the point I made earlier about Mrs. Page, I wasn't sure if Paul was turning up, but he's here now, so he's subbing in, if that's okay.
Chair,
Thank you.
just on the subbing, I'm going to have to leave at 7:45.
Okay.
For a football training session for my
Really? Priorities.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay.
And the transport.
Well, we better press on.
He's got to provide his taxi for him.
Right. Would anybody like to we accept these minutes? Councillor Borrell, thank you. Seconder for that. Councillor Elliott. Right. Thank you. All in favour? Anyone against? No. We'll come back to the exempt ones later. Right. Next item on the agenda is item 5, overview of the local plan timetable to submission and engagement with members. Are you leading on this, Tess? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So just by way of reminder, we've just got a couple of slides on this, just to frame all of the work that we're currently doing in terms of the submission process. So as we know, we went out for Regulation 19 consultation on the proposed submission local plan between March and May last year. Since then, we've been doing a lot of work, particularly with statutory consultees, and doing a lot of work behind the scenes.
Excuse me, can we go into presentation mode so it's a bit bigger for us at the back?
Yeah, I'll just wait for Terry to sort that. Okay, lovely. Is that visible? So this is the overall programme now going forwards. This is very much the focus of the next 2.5 months worth of work. So we have the extraordinary meeting of Cabinet on the 2nd of March, followed by the 16th of March extraordinary council. Both of those obviously will receive the recommendation on the submission of the local plan. Subject to member consideration and decision at that point, we will then look to submit the local plan later on in March or possibly into April. So all of that process is sort of within the control of the council. We have control over all of the timings of that part of the process. Moving on past submission, we then enter the examination process. So this is where the Planning Inspectorate really take control of the process. They are in charge of the timings from this point on. So all of the timings I've outlined here are my sort of best guess, if you like, a best indication of the likely timescales, but caveated by it will be subject obviously to PINS and their project management. We know that there are a huge number of local plans going through at the moment to try and meet the submission deadline in December. So we think our best indication is that the inspectorate will be likely to be appointing our inspector sort of early summer, followed by hearing sessions in summer, autumn of this year. We then expect to be in a position to be able to adopt late 26, early 2027. Obviously, all of that is subject to, as I say, PINS workload, and frankly, how long the examination session takes. Based on our understanding of where the inspectorate are, that's our best guess of timescales. So that places us in a really strong position to be able to adopt about this time next year. And obviously, as we know, that's the crucial stage where these policies become part of the development plan and really bite in terms of development management decisions. So leading up to that submission decision, we've got a number of sessions where there was an opportunity, obviously, to go through some of the work that has been done coming up to submission and clearly to answer detailed questions on all of that. So we've had the all-member briefing last week. We have the panel tonight and another couple of panels in February, with the date in February for the 11th of February, and then a reserve date on the 19th, should we need it. Prior to that, Cabinet and Council dates on the 2nd and 16th of March. So we'll obviously present at each of those sessions. We'll be presenting all of the work that we've done and going through the recommendations that will be included in the Cabinet paper. If there is anything you would particularly like us to cover, please do let us know, and we can endeavour to cover that. There will, I imagine, be lots and lots of questions raised at all of those meetings, and we will do our utmost to answer those. If you want to obviously let us know in advance, that means we can be fully prepared on all of those questions. Thank you.
Okay. I think we probably should go ahead with the one on the 19th, so that we're not trying to bite off too much on the 11th if you're bringing all the documentation.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should make that an assumption now, rather than try and stay here till 10 o'clock or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we do that now, then we're just going to make it easy on everyone. If that's okay. Nobody's got an objection to that. Okay, Councillor King, you were first.
Thank you, Chair. So a couple of queries. Okay, so in terms of the public meetings, obviously there is a lot of interest from residents in certain localities about the draft local plan, and rather than having the, shall we say, bit of a Horlicks that happened at the last when we had draft 8, Reg 18 and Reg 19 meetings, where people there was some confusion, I'll put it like that, about how people could, members of the public could ask questions or raise points. I'd be very grateful if that could be clarified whenever it's announced these meetings are taking place, so we can have clarification and confirmation of how individuals or groups can take part in both the Cabinet meeting and the Special Council meeting. I think it's really, really important that that happens, and there is absolute clarity about that well in advance of any deadlines, and people know what they need to do or not do, as the case may be. I think that's really important, rather than scrabbling around at the last minute to work out what's meant to happen or not happen, as the case may be. That just saves everyone a degree of embarrassment. I think it's really important. Just want to pick up one point in terms of just the proposal as it is there, is to bring the complete set of papers, which obviously none of us have seen at this group as yet, on the 2nd of March to, obviously publish that a week before. So does that mean at the local plan advisory on the 19th of February that this panel, which is set up to advise the Cabinet, is going to receive a draft copy of the submission report, basically of the submission pack that is going to be put in front of Cabinet, so we can then make advice recommendations to Cabinet, as we ought to be doing, rather than us just having a discussion about whatever's brought along. I do think that that would be a preferable thing to do, but I'm just trying to understand if that is what the plan is, to bring it on the 19th of February for us to look at and review in its entirety, or not, as the case may be. So I'm just trying to get some clarity on that, or whether in fact the only time it's going to be seen in its entirety is 7 days before the second, 7 working days before the 2nd of March, which is about a few days after the 19th, isn't it? So I'm just wondering if you could, if someone could confirm that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So a lot of these documents are being finalised now, so I will take that away if I may. I just need to take a little bit of a recce in terms of the project management of all of those and just make sure things aren't going to be completed in time for that, because what I don't want to do is be presenting things that are still waiting on 1 or 2 bits and bobs. But we will obviously present as much as we possibly can at that point. But I'll take that away and just double check. Thank you.
If I may just come back on that, Chair, but surely if you're going to a special cabinet meeting on the 2nd of March, all the documentation needs to be available 7 working days before that meeting, surely? Not? If members of the public want to comment.
Publication for cabinet, absolutely. So 7 working days before, yeah, we will certainly bring absolutely everything we possibly can, as Tessa said, to this forum, because this is the advising the cabinet, as you say. But we just need to just double check that absolutely everything is absolutely finally ready. But we will bring everything that can be brought. That package will be brought this to the panel, so that and that's why we're keeping that date in the diary, because it's a really important one. Councillor Dalton, you said already, but we can't say any more than that at the moment, but we will bring everything we possibly can.
Okay,
full advice can be given.
And just again about process, Chair, if I may, if we're bringing all that to the 19th of February, is that going to be a public session in public, or is there going to be secret sessions again? And information in secret, given that the 2nd of March is a few days after that, it's all got to go public anyway for the public agenda of the 2nd of March.
Well,
I mean, the plan is the Reg 19 plan.
That's the submission plan.
It's the submission version of the plan, which is out there. Everybody's got that or access that. It's not going to have changed. You're not going to read a different plan because it wouldn't comply. So what there will be is more supporting information and background information. But the plan is the plan. There aren't going to be any secrets or clever changes, as you do understand, Councillor King. So yes, there will be background information and supporting information, but the plan is essentially the plan that we all know and have seen.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for confirming that. Thank you.
Okay. Right, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Chair. It was actually a quick question on your previous slide, and it may be that the panel know all about this. But your last asterisk, timing subject to pins. Is it in the public knowledge what their scheduling is? And whether this plan is going to slip or be on time?
Well,
And at what point in the year would people know or be aware of?
So at the moment, those timings are not known because pins are not going to schedule it until we've taken the decision that we are going to submit, because if we take a decision not to submit, then there is no pins. Okay, so I'm just saying that for the record so everyone understands, including members of the public. Once we've submitted, the officers will then be talking to pins, as they are anyway, and a key appointment will be the programme officer. The programme officer then becomes absolutely critical to the process, because the programme officer is just that, all the timings, all the dates. But as Tessa said, from that point on, we are in the hands of the planning inspectorate to then publish the timetable, appoint the inspector, and then, but yeah, all that information leading up to the sessions will be in the public domain. And I think you've said that the inspector will carry out some sort of session to say who he wants to hear from and what the topics are. Do you want to say a bit more about that, how that works before it formally opens?
Yeah, it's often the case that the inspector will obviously introduce themselves to us quite early. and it's not a formal public inquiry. So there's a degree of flexibility and informality that can be deployed, and the inspector will adopt a human approach to this and will introduce themselves to us quite early on in terms of their suggested matters, issues and questions. They'll consult us on those where they see their early draft of where they see the sessions being programmed into a timetable. And they may even hold a pre-examinations meeting for people to attend and meet the inspector. We don't know all of those details yet. That can be, often is the case, how they want to do it. It depends really on the inspector, how they wish to do that introductory parts of the examination, Chairman.
Yeah, just to reiterate, there will be a detailed timetable published in advance, what time he's starting every day, what time he's going to finish, and the sessions, the evidence sessions. It'll all be set out in advance, as was last time. Okay. Any other questions on the process? Councillor Elliott.
Is there any time that the inspector must make a decision by?
A lot of these questions are open-ended answers, Councillor Elliott. It's a matter for the planning inspectorate. So the inspector will have the hearings, go away, prepare their report. Experience indicates 2 to 3 months, perhaps, is the longest for a report, but it'll be a matter for the inspector. I mean, going to the opposite extreme, and it is the opposite extreme, the Charnwood local plan was begun in 2016, and they just had a letter from the inspector closing the process. That's an extreme case, but it just shows you the bookends, if you like. Thank you.
Right, I've got a hand being. I'll just need to take advice. This is an informal. This is an advisory panel. Can I take? Yeah, it's at my discretion. Yeah, absolutely. If you want, can you come forward to a microphone though, please? Might be someone watching online.
Oh, apologies. I'm fine. My question is.
Could you just, for the record, would you mind saying who you are?
I do apologise. Jackie Clowes, resident of Great Glen.
Yeah.
My question is, who appoints the inspector?
I'll get an answer for you from the director on that.
It's a matter for the planning inspectorate. So they have a process internally. So there's the lead inspectors of the lead officers of the planning inspectorate will appoint an inspector to us. We have no role in
the lead being in-house.
It's within the planning inspector. When we submit the plan,
yes,
the plan then becomes owned by the planning inspectorate. It becomes their plan.
Okay.
So they will then appoint the inspector from there that they consider the most appropriate person to lead.
Right.
It could be more than one person.
Of course. And on what criteria is this inspector appointed?
Well, they are professional planners, so they'll be based on their experience.
Out of the area?
No,
Can't have a local.
No.
No.
So it's out of the area.
Yeah, there'll be criteria for independent. You know, they won't have if they have. They'll make sure that they don't have overt local knowledge or previous. It'll be the whole word. The key word is independent.
Right.
But we don't. So they're looking at this from the point of view of planning matters exclusively.
I mean, to give you an example of the two, I mean, it's not quite the same because it's planning appeals, but they are usually retired chartered town planners that they practice, or some are legal people. They hold a legal qualification. We had one recently that had been a barrister. So they are professional people that have worked in the planning environment probably for many years.
Right.
And then they get appointed to become an inspector.
Right. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we've covered those issues just in relation to timetable and submission, and we will certainly come back on the issue of the documentation that will be available to the panel. So yeah, let's move on to item 6, which is land south of Gartree Road. We did touch on this at the last meeting of setting up an advisory committee. Are you going to get on this, Dave?
Thanks, Chairman. So yeah, absolutely. So the panel, when we met on the 9th of December, I think it was, were very interested in how we could members could be involved in shaping the land south of Gartry Road in terms of, I suppose, a place shaping agenda, and also ultimately how we could involve perhaps a wider community in shaping the site, the evolution of land south of Gartry Road, which is obviously clearly a major site in the district. So just to orientate people for the avoidance of doubt, there is the polygon or polygons of the site. The larger one, the one that's very sort of has a very jagged shape, is the area of urban and civic, and then there's a smaller area to the south, a rectangle, but just to the northwest of Great Glen, that's Homes England land. Clearly it's a cross boundary site. You can see the park greyed out area there, that's in Oadby and Wigston borough. Roughly there's a 3,100 homes would be proposed in the Harbour district, and 800 and so in the 900 and so in the Oadby and Wigston borough, with a total of 4,000 is the indicative figure for that. I say site promoters already said Homes England and Urban and Civic, and the site has, as we know, we heard this quite early on, been identified by central government as one of their housing home accelerator sites. So Homes England are closely related, closely involved in this and its delivery as part of their delivery programme. The site access is entirely within the Harbour district, so the Oadby and Wigston element is dependent upon access through the land in the Harbour district. They cannot develop that bit of the site in the Oadby and Wigston borough without access from within the Harbour district. So the idea then was to think about this local plan advisory panel. Obviously is very useful for policy making, but we were thinking, after members made these points at the last panel, that the idea of a separate advisory committee chairman to allow members to influence the delivery and shaping of the delivery of this site separate from this panel would be a good idea to consider. So some of the vital statistics are there. Again, I've already said about the numbers. Community infrastructure is on the slide, the local centre, the health centre, the sports, the secondary school, which is, I would suggest, quite a significant piece of additional strategic infrastructure. Not very often a new secondary school arises, and we're more used to primary provision. We need that employment land. Clearly, large site, we want it to be sustainable. We want it to be capable of being a site that is self-contained as much as possible, without minimising the need to travel, etc. And it's a requirement of all local plans in the country to meet the needs of every aspect of the housing equation, and that would include travelling show people. So being the largest site in the district, it's very appropriate, we think, for sustainable development that we allocate travelling show people to this site as well. And clearly the district is in need of cemetery provision, we know that, so there's some cemetery provision in there too. But importantly, there's some green wedge, permanent green wedge between this development and Great Glen to safeguard the setting of the historic village of Great Glen. Then we also thought about, that's the advisory committee for councillors of this authority, and looking to invite councillors from Oadby and Wigston onto that as well. We have had some conversations, but in addition to that, we would look, we think it's a good idea to establish a community forum as well, to allow the residents, we've members of the public here tonight, to shape and engage and help bring forward, give us their views on this site and how it would best to be implemented. So it is an inviting place. We have found a good quality place making, and I understand there are different views on the site, and I don't want to sound over the top, but to be a legacy, if you like, to be a quality development for generations to come. So we've clearly evolving this. It's not in stone what this would look like. The advisory panel of members could advise and scope out how this might work moving forward. we think it will evolve through as the development evolves. Starting in a way of evolving the development, and then as it gets more and more firm, to have other roles over time through different means and media of involvement. The aim would be to encourage cohesion of this within the community, and cohesion as much as possible with existing communities in the area. And we would like members' input to that, and we will, if members like this idea, we'll move forward on putting in sessions into diaries for members to scope out this entity.
Okay, right. Oh, sorry, you haven't finished.
There's another couple of slides. It was just to say, Councillor Galton, we would suggest the forum would meet quarterly. We would need to work up terms of reference. There's some early ideas on terms of reference there on scoping this out, which we would clearly want to have input from our own councillors on through the advisory committee, and also advice from Oadby and Wigston. There's some thoughts there, their early feelings of officers around what the membership might look like. Your good self-chairing, or the portfolio holder chairing it. Members there are from the Oadby, Wigston and Harbour District and parish councils, and some of those councillors also county division members as well. Myself and appropriate officers from the team, the promoters, Urban and Civic and Homes England, and other consultees as necessary, as issues are presented, issues of the day, if you like, how is education, that we would need to look at. Oadby, we know that Urban and Civic have a strong and long track record of community engagement in the places that they've developed previously. There are a couple here. Alconbury Weald is a well-known site that Urban and Civic have been involved in. They're experts, I would suggest, in master planning and innovative involvement techniques and means of involving the community in innovative and imaginative ways, and creating long-term relationships with existing and new communities as well. So that's just a couple of case studies there. And these are types of examples of how we could work together to create that community engagement. Charrettes is a way of doing it, planning for real exercises, open consultation, discussion events, using a variety of media to bring in the communities as we think is appropriate in this context and in this area. So there's thoughts around that, and obviously the slide deck can be circulated for members to look at this in a little bit more detail afterwards, because obviously conscious of that might be quite small, some of those quotes to read on the screen from that particular example is Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. But yeah, so it was just to sort of set that out really, Councillor Galton, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, well, this isn't completely new. We've done this for other developments. Councillor King did it for the Market Harbour development, didn't we, some years ago? We did actually set one up for Scraptoft North, but it never got very far. I don't know, did we ever have one for Lutterworth?
Yeah, there's one.
There's one existing.
One for Lutterworth East as well, yeah. Well, the community engagement group there isn't an advisory committee, but there's an engagement group.
Right, I think Councillor Bremner, you were first, and then Councillor King.
Thank you. Something strikes me from the long view of being a councillor. The first map that you showed didn't show topography. And the reason I'm asking is that you can have all the consultation you wish, but when something is actually built, and perhaps built without any due consideration to natural drainage patterns, problems can arise. And that's why I'm focusing on the topography of that map. Because on Airfield Farm, not the Wellington Place area, but further along towards Lebanon Hill, on the left-hand side, many of the homes there had problems with flooding in their gardens because there's no due regard to the natural flow of water across that land. And this statement is really here for this panel. Be cognizant of that, because you have evidence of it having been done by this council, build the homes, but didn't have due regard to the topography of where water would flow, and it flowed into the residents' gardens after the houses were built. And I come back to the topography of that map needs to be really clear for people to understand that. You can't just give an outline map. That doesn't really tell you anything. It just tells you the boundary. It doesn't tell you what's in the boundary. I mean, that's the point of fact what's outside the boundary, what's flowing into it. And the second point, and I know I'll be controversial saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Has Leicestershire County Council given a green light to the sustainability of this site? So there's 2 points in that.
One first about,
We're talking about the principles of setting up.
we're talking about the principle of setting up a panel. The issues the first issue you're raising is really a good one that the panel should get into the detail of and consider. So if you think it's a good idea to set up a panel, then the kind of issues you're raising. The second one.
Sorry, Chair, I was referring directly to the map that you presented in this meeting. So
Yeah, we'll go back. Yeah, okay, we take your point. I think it's just identifying the site of that map, but we can go back to that.
Can we go back to the map? Harry?
no, it's okay. Go on to the next part.
Yeah, I can assure you, Councillor Bremner, that is one of the issues that is front and centre, urban and civic need, and we would expect them to be delivering in accordance and integrating with the landscape and all associated with the landscape. I'm aware of what happened in this, not a million miles from this area last year, and the residents from Great Glen here tonight. Landscape and integration with fluvial mechanics is obviously very, very, very important, and drainage and so on of that nature. Yeah. So the second point was around. What was your second point, Councillor Bremner?
Has Leicestershire County Council given
Leicestershire County Council
that they are
Apologies.
that site sustainable as it's planned?
Well, part of the ongoing work that's going on now is we are constantly very, very rapidly working with Leicestershire County Council at a high level on their relationship with us and this site in the local plan. So it's not going to be that Leicestershire County Council will give the green light. We are potentially looking at whether some modifications to the plan might be required to make the plan sound in their view. So it's a normal part of the process to work across boundaries and work with local authorities in that way. It will be the inspector. If anyone's going to give a green light, it'll be the inspector that will declare the plan sound or yeah.
But the county council will be a key stakeholder, and they will be at the examination, and they will have to set out their views as they are at that time, and whether any of their concerns or issues have been met or not, as the case may be. I would point you into, make this point at the last meeting, and I know Councillor King started looking it up straight away because it had been published today. There was, in my opinion, quite an important cabinet report out just before Christmas, which really is looking at the bigger picture, but did talk about local plans. And I would say a slight change in direction, because they are now recognising that the development's going to occur. And if you don't have a local plan, it's going to happen through speculative development. And it is in everyone's interest, their interest as much as the local planning authorities, to do it through planning and not through speculative development. So I do see a change in that. It doesn't address any of the particular concerns, particularly about this site that they raise in terms of infrastructure delivery and mitigation and so on. But, you know, before there was just saying the plan's not sound. Now I think they are moving to wanting to work with us to make it sound. And I think that is a change, in my opinion. Councillor King.
Okay, let's just pick this up. So first of all, you said that. So let's just pick this up. So the last meeting, the bit that we had, the presentation about land south of Gartree, was held in secret. So no member of the community could actually understand what was going on or have any knowledge of any proposals whatsoever about what was being proposed. It's in the private minutes. So, and that's even there. So the fact that you've just come along today and produced this presentation in public saying, let's set up a advisory committee for land south of Gartree Road. I don't think we actually said that. I mean, we just said, how's the engagement going to work? I did raise that because I was concerned by what I heard in the private session, the lengthy presentation by the people from whatever it's called, the firm that is working with Homes England and Urban and Civic. And what we also heard at that meeting is that they've also still got to get the green light from the Treasury for the investment in infrastructure. And we were told that there's no quantum, a finite quantum of how much that is, or whether that's actually been agreed to. But we did get told at that meeting it wouldn't be until much later this year before there was confirmation of whether that was going to happen or not. So there are a lot of what ifs. Just picking up the county council. So as the county councillor for this division area, I've had a number of meetings with senior officers at the county council, and you're right, they are trying to move forward, but equally, that's not a given. That they're going to reach it, that the agreement's being reached, because they've still got to reach that agreement. And the position, as I understand, is still that the evidence doesn't support the plan that you've just told us earlier isn't changing. So despite the fact that over nearly 2,500 people from Great Glen made a submission to Reg 19 saying this is the wrong proposal in the wrong place, basically the council's decided to ignore them and not made a single. No, that's what's happened.
No, we haven't taken any decisions yet.
No, hang on. But you just
We've not taken any decisions yet. You've seen the timetable. You just said that we've decided to plough ahead. We
hasn't changed. Is not changing.
I did,
what was
but
put out.
we've not decided whether to submit that plan
No,
yet.
okay.
But that's what you just said.
Subject to submission.
Right.
But as it stands at the moment, based on everything I know and what you said earlier, the plan is not expected to change dramatically from that was put out at Reg 19. You said that yourself earlier, so a few minutes ago. So that's where we are. Now, officers have come along tonight, and I'm grateful that you have done, although it would have been helpful to have this presentation before the meeting, so we could have actually read it along with members of the community, and then we could have come up with some sensible points for clarification and questions, and maybe suggestions of how we can move this forward. But now we've got to go away, read this, and then come back afterwards, because there's a lot of information to assimilate, and the people here from the community, they need to go back and seek views of the community, of the groups they represent, to see what they think about it. Whereas if we put this out in advance, they could have done that in advance. I just don't understand why we're not doing that. So I'll come back to.
There's no urgent necessity, of course.
To be fair, Chair, I think it is, because actually bringing this at such a late stage in the process, this is not just an urban extension of 1,000 or 1,500 homes. This is a new town, bigger, as I keep saying, bigger than Lutterworth is now. This is not an insignificant development. So
exactly what you put forward in the last plan.
I'm not saying I didn't. I'm not saying I didn't.
But the notion that this has never been done before.
I didn't say it hadn't been. I didn't say, but the level of detail that's been outlined but then we've got no terms of reference. What is this group going to do? Is it there just as a debating shop, or is it there to kind of, and who's it going to advise? And this is not just one council, but two councils, and it's cross area. So it's a much bigger undertaking.
So we're not agreeing.
Lots of other. No, I know we're not.
We're not agreeing this tonight.
No, I know that. We haven't got any decision-making powers at this meeting.
No, if the panel thinks this is worth something taking forward, then we'll ask the officers to go away and work it up in more detail.
I think it needs further exploration with potential stakeholder groups to see what they think about it and how it could be made to work. But I don't think, I haven't read all of that. I haven't absorbed all that information. It needs looking at, it needs thinking about, and then coming back. So I think in principle, we could look at it, but I think there's got to be a lot more work
That's
done.
all we're looking for tonight.
But what I'm
In principle, is this something you want to do more work on?
But I don't want to do it at all because I don't actually think this is the right plan. But you've just told us it's not likely to change. So and also, as I said, nearly 2,500 people made a submission in Reg 19 saying they didn't think this was the right plan either. So I'm just making that point. And all I'm going to say is, you've just announced this now, that this is what we're thinking about doing. And I'm just clarifying that if that had been put out there in advance, maybe we could have made a bit more progress this evening rather than us having to go away and look at it and come back later.
I mean, it's only really evolved to this point in the last week, okay? One of the reasons for that is officers have had to talk to colleagues at OP in Wigston, because no point in going ahead working this up if they don't wish to be involved.
Sure.
So it is in embryo stage. What we're doing tonight is exactly the words you used 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
In principle, is this something that's worth spending some more time on, working up? Of course, there has to be a terms of reference, exactly, and who will be there, and absolutely consult that draft list that was put up of local members and parishes.
If I may,
absolutely approach them. They may wish to add to that.
If I may, Chair, what I suggest is a meeting is convened, not here, but a meeting is convened with the relevant parties, possibly in situ, at a location in situ, so as many people as possible can attend, so that you can then explain it to them, what's being proposed, and they can then give you the feedback directly as to what they think may or may not work.
We can do that
rather than us debating it here. And we're not going to get anywhere this evening with it. I just think it's a lot more.
It has to start somewhere, doesn't it?
No, I agree. I'm not disagreeing with on that, but I'm just very surprised it's come out at this late hour.
Okay,
Thank you.
Can I ask the director to respond to your comments in terms of how it might go forward, and then one gentleman on the road wants to say a few words, which is fine.
Thanks, Chairman. The first thing we were going to suggest doing would be to get members' views on the establishment of the advisory committee, and we've got some work that we can bring forward and work up on that if members wish that, and then the idea of scoping a community entity to help community, enable the community engage in shaping is certainly something we can work more on under the advice of the panel, really, and that's what we're doing here. I think we've listened to what councillors have been saying about some of bit more material need to be brought into public session, and they're keen to be open and do that in a bit more.
So they would be open to the public, the meetings.
The advisory.
Yeah,
they could be. They'd be the same. I would suggest they'd be the same type of constitution as this meeting. So if there was something specifically needed that met the exemption criteria, they could be made exempt. If it met the criteria. Other than that, they would be advisory committees, rather like this one, that would be held in public session.
Okay. Please come forward.
Thank you. My name is Henri, I'm the chairman of Stop the New Town. You will recall that we're not NIMBYs, we're not bananas, built absolutely nothing anywhere at all, never at all. But we do want to actually see the infrastructure. And all of these plans, and I believe that Councillor Gorton was on the opposing the so-called eco-town some years ago, about a decade ago. The situation hasn't changed. The infrastructure is still not there. LCC, Leicestershire County Council, has come forward to say this was an unsound plan, largely on the lack of infrastructure. And on the basis of what I've heard this evening, which is the same plan, I can guarantee you that in 2 weeks, we got 2,370 people to oppose essentially the local plan as proposed. I can guarantee you that number will go up a lot. And the fact that we have heard this evening that there's been no change will make that situation, I would suggest, even worse, particularly given the fact that in Great Glen in its own right, there's another proposed addition to this site, 630 dwellings. We have performed the analysis, and certainly the planning will understand it very well. We've done a detailed analysis of those submissions. None of them have anything adequate when it comes to flooding. None of them have anything adequate when it comes to transport. So I would suggest, and this is my question to all of you, how many of you have read the detailed submission that we've made to the Reg 19, which highlight point by point why under the NPPF this is an unsound plan. How many of you have actually read that document that we produced, which actually is on the internet for everybody to read and has been submitted with 2,370 individuals who can go to the planning inspectorate? You have not. Who has read it?
Sorry, can I just, I'm just taking advice on your specific question. And the answer to that is that information has not been published yet. So all, not just for your site, but for all the sites, the responses, the thousands of responses have not been published. They will be published as part of the pack of information that will be available to councillors when they come to have to make a decision.
With
So,
respect, Chairman, this is not the question I'm asking. This is a document that we've also published, and we're very happy to distribute to everybody if you were happy to entertain that. We can certainly email it to all the members.
if you want to do that, that's fine. But what you submitted during the Reg 19
Yes,
has not been published yet.
right. So, but this panel clearly doesn't know what the local community, which is impacted by the proposal, is basically very clearly point by point has highlighted.
That
as
is
issues.
that is what we are going to consider at meetings coming forward shortly.
But how could Cabinet, in weeks from now, make decisions on information which is not folding into that information what the public?
I'll ask the director to explain the process in terms of when information is published.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Galton. So the plan making system is in I think the way you're portraying it, Henri, if I can may call you that, Mr. Willard, the planning making system is a bit counterintuitive. So when we consult on the plan, which we did at Reg 19, essentially that is to gather when the council published the plan, what it was doing was publishing a plan that it intended to submit. And it was going out to consult the community on that plan with a view to gathering that package of information and presenting it to the inspector. It's not that the system doesn't work that we consult the community, go away, look at the plan, come back, and we have that sort of dialogue of change and polishing the plan. This is the way the system works. It's maybe suboptimal in some ways in terms of the way the community see the process. They make those representations thinking, well, surely we're going to get another sort of look at this. The council are going to go away. They're going to look again. They're going to come back. When we publish that, that's not the way. So what we've done is we've gathered that information together. The whole thing, everything everyone's said, the whole global thing, and colleagues will say it's thousands of pages, and it probably is. That will be available for the cabinet and the council. It'll be a big document for cabinet first of all to look at and make a recommendation to council on submission, and then for council to decide whether it wishes to submit the plan or not.
Look, I understand that. We have looked at the NPPF and the law associated with that in detail, as you know, from the detailed submissions we made. My only observation would be that you have a local plan advisory panel that is not aware yet of information that we have published on the public domain, in public sphere, which actually reflects the views from quite a number of constituents. And in terms of transparency and in terms of effectiveness of this panel, my suggestion would be that you actually do circulate that pronto so that there are no misunderstandings. Because I can tell you what I'm reading now and what I'm seeing here, with no change. I'm hearing that LCC is still not quite on the same page. I'm hearing that about a week ago, a statement of common ground maybe is moving in a particular direction that we know nothing about. And all these things are going to basically inflame the situation, which I don't think any one of us want. So it's simply an observation that I would make. Thank you.
Absolutely. We wouldn't circulate information that wasn't submitted into the plan making process. So as Councillor Galton, I think, has said, if you wanted to circulate that information, that would be a matter for yourself and the Stop the Newtown organisation. We wouldn't dream of circulating information that wasn't in the plan making process and owned by the council in that sense, if that makes sense.
Just pick up on one of the point that you and Councillor King have made, that the plan is the plan and the council has effectively to accept the plan or not accept the plan. That is not to say that there won't be any changes during the process. They could be initiated by the council seeking modifications to the plan, and I'll ask the director to explain how that works. Or it could be that the inspector comes back and says to the council, I want some changes made. If he was to do, or she was to do that, and they were acceptable to the council, we would have to go back out to consultation on modifications for 6 weeks. So I don't want you to go away with the idea that there is no scope for change, because there is the modification, but that is in the hands of the planning inspector to ask for that, or for the council to put it forward, but then it's up to the inspector whether they would accept those modifications. But I'm going to ask the director to explain the modification process.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Galton. So when we say there's no change, the council have published a plan for Reg 19, the plan they intend to submit. Following review of the representations, the council and happens across the country can suggest a list of changes that it thinks might be useful for the inspector to consider. So we can suggest modification, we can suggest changes. The inspector could then look at those changes at the hearings and not take notes of them. Decide, or they could say, oh yeah, there's some that would make the plan more sound. Or they could have their own. They could develop their own, and this is the purpose of the hearings. It's the purpose of the examination, to have that examination process into the document. So when we say no, when Councillor Galton mentions no change, and putting words in your, not putting words in your mouth, it means the plan will need to be, I would suggest, submitted as is. But we could submit that with a list of potential changes for the inspector to consider, and that will be something for council and cabinet to consider as well. And the inspector may well have their own ideas on what ought to be changed as well, if anything. It's often the case there are changes, I have to admit. It's very rare a plan will go, if ever, a plan goes through without any changes at all. Thank you, Councillor Galton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to pick up the point about submissions from Reg 18. I mean, we've raised this before at this meeting about, for example, Reg 18 comments. They've not been published either. So, you know, they weren't published in full. And we had excerpts, extracts of those that have been published. So we still haven't got line of sight on what, various people said in full at Reg 18 when the Reg 19 report went out, not to the best of my knowledge anyway. And the same with Reg 19. We're not going to see that until very late on in the process. And I understand that's what happened previously, but it doesn't mean it's. Personally, I don't agree with that. I think we should see them, or when we've, after the council's, after the officers, analyse them, they should have been published then. But that's my personal view. I understand that's not the corporate process, but I just think, in the interest again of transparency and openness, to publish those comments as soon as we can makes a lot of sense, because then everyone can see what's been said about it. Whereas at this way, we just get everything in one dump of information right at the last minute, and then we have to wade through it, and it's quite a lot to take on board. So I think, we have raised it before, it didn't get actioned, and we are where we are. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Woodwards.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking forwards to the public hearings. I was just wondering what format they take. So would Stop the Town actually get a chance to actually plead their case with the inspector?
So again, we come back to the point, the inspector will lead those hearings. They've been in this room before. They're often like this, actually, where the inspector will sit somewhere in this area and they'll have the participants that they've invited, and it will be them that invites them on two wings of the table like this. So they'll look at an issue and they'll invite interested parties that they wish to hear from, and it will be them that make that decision about who they wish to hear from. Often it's the case, though again I stress it's a matter for the inspector, that they'll deal with strategic issues in the first week. So it'll be housing numbers, spatial distribution, employment distribute, that kind of thing. And then they'll tend to look at more site-specific matters in the second part of the examination. Often it could be, in this council before, it was two to 3 weeks. And they'll produce a comprehensive programme that, as Councillor Galton's already said, will be managed by the programme officer, who will look after the administration of the examination under the instruction of the inspector. Professional.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting to sit there as bystander. There'll be all sorts of people seeking to come along and convince the inspector. There'll be developers and landowners and all the people that haven't got in the plan, that wanted to be in the plan, who still think they should be in the plan, all sorts. And he or she will have to make a judgment about who he wants to call. But for this site, it's inconceivable that there won't be a dedicated session on this, because it's such a key part of the plan, when he'll want to hear from a range of organisations, views, statutory bodies, consultative bodies, parish, the lot. Tess, did you want to just say anything about the information, the responses on the Reg 18 and the Councillor King's question, just in terms of the publication and format that they'll be in?
Yeah, by all means, thank you, Chair. So we published to accompany Regulation 19, we published the consultation statement. So that provided a high-level overview of all the responses to Reg 18, which is what the regulations require. When we publish all the papers for Cabinet, what we'll do is update all of that. So the consultation statement will include a summary of the Regulation 18 responses, and then also the Regulation 19 responses. What we will also prepare is a schedule of all of those responses. So that will be a schedule which is in plan order. So in other words, all of the representations have been identified to the relevant policy paragraph that they refer to. And then all of that is published in plan order. So you'll literally say paragraph 1.1, all of the comments on that, paragraph 1.2, all the comments. So that entire schedule will be available. And it's obviously done in that way to aid the inspector, so that all of the comments on a particular paragraph or policy can be seen together. So all of that will become available. We will also publish responses for the inspector in slightly different order. The inspector will also probably want it alphabetically. So we will respond to those kinds of needs for the inspector, but certainly all of that will be in the public arena. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that's the answer you gave when I asked you last time. So, but thanks very much.
That's consistent. Okay,
Which is that we don't get the detailed responses until you've just said, until it's published. We just had the high level previously, which is what I said. Thank you, Chair.
So going back to the original question, which was about the establishment of an advisory committee, does the panel want to take that forward and ask for further detail on that? And then there was a specific suggestion by Councillor King that we held some sort of listening exercise out in the community to explain how it might work and to hear anyone's views about how and who should be involved in that. I'm quite happy to do that. It's part of the process of gathering information. Yeah.
So what's this advisory panel going to do that the community group's not going to do? If I can ask that question.
The advisory panel was envisaged as being a panel rather like this, but instead of looking at the local plan policy development, it would sort of, because this is, as you said several times, this is a really significant site, to guide from the point of view of our own members and Obi and Wigston's members. And they're really keen to, I think it's fair to say, join us on this. We've spoken to the leader, and they're keen to join, to have an entity to shape this site from within our own authority and Obi and Wigston.
I just think, if I may, Chair, going back on previous experience, I think you mentioned Lutterworth and Scraptoft North and the Northwest Market Harborough SDA. And I think rather than it being a councillor committee of different councillors, which may or may not be, I actually think it's better to be community led. And I think very much that because then you've got people who've, I don't really like this expression, but I'm going to use it, who've got skin in the game, basically. And I think that's really important. So rather than it being a selection of councillors who might sit on a committee, I think it ought to be the people nearest to the ground, whether that's the parishes, the individual ward members, etc. Rather than it being, I think it has got to be some sort of joint committee. I'm not sure advisory committees the right, I don't know, it depends what comes back to what is this committee to do, what's its purpose, and who's it advising. Is it advising cabinet? And we don't have a cabinet at Oakham Wigston anyway, so who's it advising? And I'm not sure that's, and that's just my thoughts. Others may have a different view, but I think in terms of the community side, I think that, if this happens, it's got to be the community group that's involved in and dealing with the issues, rather than it being, as I say, but that just because otherwise you're creating two bodies, and then which body is doing what, and the advisory committee hasn't got any decision-making powers anyway. So
the main difference, as I see it, is this doing a policy, and the new one will be very much working with DM, the growth side of that team, about the planning application process and the master plan. That's the distinction.
yeah, well, I think we need to see a bit more worked up on how this would work.
Well, all we've been asked to do tonight is give a view on the principle of going ahead with that.
Until we've seen some more details.
In terms of who's there and what role they have, we will have to get some further advice on that, won't we? Because as you know, the virtue of being elected, that is the basis on which you get here, and then can have an involvement in that. If we're talking about the community, which is absolutely vital, it may have to be a slightly different body.
We were envisaging both. We were envisaging an entity from within the authority working in partnership with the members that Oakham Wigston put forward, rather like this, to shape from within the council to work alongside and support and advise the growth team and Mark Patterson and his colleagues on the evolution of the work that they're doing, rather like this panel has supported myself, Tess, and the team on the development of the local plan. And then have a community side as well, community engagement, rather like you were saying around Lutterworth East and Scraptoft North, to engage with the community as well, for them to shape and contribute to shaping this as well. We think they may have a different view, but we thought these were two useful initiatives to put on the table for panel's view.
If I may, Chair, then if that's what's, I don't know who decides that. But whichever organ of the council is going to decide that, I think some thought needs to be given, certainly from the harbour end, about political balance of these groups. And I think this panel is unbalanced, given the current status quo of the council. I know it isn't required to be politically balanced, but I do think, Chair, as you're the deputy leader of the council, you need to take that away to your leader and have that conversation, because I think only our group only having 2 out of the 6 members on this group, I don't think it's acceptable.
When we first kicked this process off, Councillor King, and you were the leader, I think there was one place on the panel for the not all the other groups.
Well, you had 1/3 of the council, we had 2/3, so you had pro rata. We're now on a 50-50
I think there was one place, if I remember right.
Well, I think it was 2, but
No, I think
it's split hairs now.
So,
Well,
and now you've got considerable more than that.
20%.
But I'll listen to what you're saying, and I'll certainly, in terms of how we move forward with what's proposed tonight, political balance, yes,
I think that's a very important issue. I appreciate Overwood's has a different composition, but again, that's why I think whatever's being proposed, we would need to see and look at carefully rather than just viewing it on a presentation. Thank you.
Okay,
Right, I think we've covered
covered that one then. So we're now going to move.
Oh, sorry, Chairman, I was just going to say that.
Sorry, Chair, we can share the terms of reference for this group, if that would help members thinking as a start of a ten, sort of as a base point for thinking. We have, and we did put some ideas of terms of reference on the slide as well, which members will get in the slide pack. So there'll be something to go off from terms of reference.
Or shall we agree to circulate those then to members in the slide pack? And then if you've got any feedback on the terms of reference, let us have them.
Yeah, in the terms of reference as well, there is a suggestion of membership, but if you do want a different membership, then let me know, and that's a suggestion that can be made.
Okay, if whenever you can get that out, that'll be great. How soon do you want to get those comments back by, Chair?
Well,
Depends when we get
can
the
bring
pack
this
out,
back
doesn't it?
here, probably not to the next one, to the one after that. So let's say, and let's say 3 weeks.
Well, if you could confirm that in the email, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank
take
you.
that away, confirm that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So if we can move on to the introduction to the community infrastructure level. Now, we've done some work on this, and I think there's common agreement now that this may be the way in which we can ramp up the amount of infrastructure funding to not just for the site we've been talking about, but infrastructure for the whole local plan. We did a presentation, member presentation last week. So if you were on that, you're actually going to get a very similar presentation. But what we're doing tonight is obviously sharing that in the public domain now in terms of seriously looking at the community infrastructure level to address this question that's come up again and again and again is how are you going to deliver the infrastructure to support the plan? So if you'd like to kick off the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. So what I'll cover really is starting from first base principles really in this presentation on what is the community infrastructure levy. How does that as a developer contribution tool differ to the other tools that you may be aware of, such as Section 106? Can Section 106 as a tool and SIL be used together to raise funds? Importantly, why it's important at this point in time to consider introducing SIL and the work that's started, technical work that started on that. And I'll outline essentially where we are in terms of progress with that work and where we're going in terms of a work programme going forward. So SIL is essentially a charge on development. It's a contribution that a developer would make to pay for infrastructure that is required to support that development and support the development of the whole of the plan and the plan growth overall. Typically, it can cover a range of things, very much everything that would be required by way of supporting infrastructure through schools and nurseries, roads, public transport, health facilities, parks, and open spaces. So the money would be collected by the council. So there is consideration around the changes to the operation and the administration of how that money is collected that will need to be thought through in tandem with the work that's underway at the moment around whether it's actually viable to do so and whether development can afford to do so. Once it's collected, it's then spent on priorities that are agreed, jointly agreed, and set out annually in statements at the end of the financial year called an infrastructure funding statement. So importantly, parish councils and town councils can receive a share of that monies that's coming in to the charging authority, which is a term that's used essentially in this instance would be Harborough District Council would be the receiving authority, the sending out of the charging requirements to the developers in receipt of the funds. So in simple terms, it will help make developments palatable in infrastructure terms and support and provide funds to support the services and facilities required to support that growth. So essentially, that's what the community infrastructure levy is. It's not a new thing. It's been around since 2010.
I don't know whether you misspoke earlier, but when you talk about the priorities, you said they're jointly agreed. So jointly agreed between whom?
Oh, come on. So just very quickly, because obviously there's often a lot of confusion, or there can be confusion around what the community infrastructure levy is and what Section 106 is, and the differences between them. So we can share these slides afterwards, but hopefully you can read this. So just to be very, very clear, the SIL is a fixed charge on new development. It's set in advance. It's very transparent. It's paid as money, not site-specific works. So the charging authority receives the funds and then gives it to the party that's going to deliver that infrastructure. Very often it's used for strategic infrastructure across the area. So it's not always necessarily spent in the area where the development happens. It applies to most developments. We can come on to that, where we're going with that, which developments we think are viable later on. Importantly, it's non-negotiable as well. You set the rate. Once you've gone through the consultation on the rates, they are fixed, and they've gone through the viability test. Therefore, you expect a developer to pay them. They're indexed. They go up over time. So I think the key thing is that they're payments towards district-wide and local infrastructure priorities that have been identified through the local plan process in the infrastructure delivery plan. Whereas the Section 106 is a legal agreement tied to a specific planning agreement and a specific site. They're negotiated on a site-by-site basis. They can be money. They can be works that the developer does on behalf of a third party. They're very much around site-specific impacts. So think things like immediate junction improvements to access a site, or a local play space that might be required on that site. And they, they're very much more focused on the site specifics requirements. I'll just flick through this because I'm just conscious of time, Chair. So one question that gets asked a lot is, can SIL as a fund be spent alongside Section 106? And very simply, yes, it can, but for different purposes. So the SIL is a standardised charge on floor space that funds strategic infrastructure, as I said, whereas the Section 106 is paying for things that are directly related to the development itself, so site-specific mitigation. So that you can use them in tandem. They'll be used for different pots to pay for different infrastructure requirements of sites. As I mentioned, the councils typically coordinate what the strategic infrastructure requirements of its overall growth are through its infrastructure delivery plan. So we have an infrastructure delivery plan for this current plan. It's a live document. It's an iterative document. They're not fixed. And good practice is that they're updated once your plan is adopted and going forward. So it's really important that all of this spend is transparent, obviously. So what you tend to have in place is a document called an infrastructure funding statement, which sets out every year how much monies have been accrued and what they're going to be spent on, or the pots may well be held for several years, depending on the nature of those projects to accrue. So why are we considering it now, given that it's been around for a while? I think it's fair to say that it's seen as Councillor Galton has mentioned at the start, a really important sort of concurrent piece of the jigsaw puzzle alongside the plan to identify whether it's viable to, and then set a series of rates for non-negotiable charges on development to support the strategic infrastructure that we know is going to be required to support the plan. So it gives some certainty to ensuring that there is money being accrued to deliver the infrastructure that's set out in that infrastructure delivery plan. And some of the things that have been mentioned tonight that we know are going to be forthcoming on sites, such as the secondary schools, strategic public transports, etc. I think, well, I've covered. I think I've covered enough there. But just to move on, the potential benefits of SIL investment are very, very tightly aligned to the strategics of the plan, the strategic objectives of the plan, and the corporate objectives of the council. Very flexible in how it could be spent, really. It can be spent on any of these things or in any of these areas, subject to discussion around what the priorities are considered to be the priorities of the charging authority, which would be the council. So I think the key message from this slide really is that there is a higher degree of flexibility on how the money is spent, where it's spent, than Section 106, which is very much linked to mitigation of impacts directly associated with a site. So how will those SIL priorities be agreed and the benefits of it delivered? Well, that again, that's, when we're up and the council is potentially up and running with this, that's a live process. It needs to be aligned with the local plan and the strategic plans of service providers and their priorities, which are set out in the infrastructure delivery plan. Ongoing technical assessments and infrastructure needs, taking into consideration the rolling cycle of infrastructure planning that various organisations do, such as the LEA, the water companies, etc., on their cycle, on their planning cycles. That needs to be taken into consideration. Significant amounts of community and stakeholder engagement and how that prioritisation process comes about and identifies the needs. And obviously it needs to be extremely transparent decision-making process led by elected members. So there are many technical pieces of work going on in that live process, as well as obviously the decision on how the money's spent through the local community and stakeholders. So what are we currently doing to progress SIL? Well, we've got underway with a piece of work, and Adam next to me will go through the detail of that technical piece of work on viability and what's starting to emerge from that in due course. Aspinall Verdi, Adam next to me, have been in place as a consultancy supporting officers on this since about September. So we're in several months into doing some baseline work and just understanding the market, what the market, baseline information around values, all of the data that you need to test the reasonableness of viability across both residential and commercial development. So really the key question that Adam's been set is, how much can developers reasonably afford to pay without impeding the delivery of the plan? We have to make sure that we balance that still with other policy requirements in the draft plan. We're not making homes unaffordable. We're not reducing the affordable housing requirements. We're not harming good design and or environmental standards through the rates that we set. So a lot of work is going on in the background around gathering information to allow that process to take place. And we've had a couple of stakeholder engagement exercises, technical stakeholder engagement exercises with the development industry and adjacent authority partners to help shape that process in terms of the assumptions going into the viability work. So
those last 2 points of the previous slide.
Yeah.
Are they not contradicting each other? So the second last one is making sure SIL's affordable.
Yes.
And then the last point is going, well, it might not be affordable on large sites, and we go section 106 by preference. But surely by definition, the previous one says it's affordable.
It's affordable, yeah. The mechanism, whether the mechanism is the right mechanism for larger sites, SIL, as opposed to section 106.
And what would be the advantage of section 106 over SIL, for instance?
Yeah.
What would be the advantage? So what would the advantage of section 106 over SIL be on a large site?
On a larger site, I think the issue normally is that there's so much infrastructure related directly to that site that there's a risk that if you're charging SIL on it, essentially you would be pooling and collecting SIL monies to feed them back to support that infrastructure again. So there's a risk it's quite a circular situation. And that that context is one you need to consider as the sites scale up, and where you draw that line is one of the pieces of work we're looking at the moment.
Okay, so it's a case of hypothecating it just for that development, really, is it? So what we're saying?
Yeah, or larger developments in general. There's no sort of set threshold. It's looking at things in the round and working out, do you want a circular situation? Ideally not. Where does that start to happen?
What? Do I just finish this slide? I can. I think I've really covered. I've really covered what's on this side. So at the moment we are looking at testing SIL rates on the different types of development that will come forward in the districts. So looking at housing, but not just housing generically, housing on different types of site, greenfield, brownfield, different scales of development. Also specialist types of housing like buy to rent housing, as well as market housing, specialist housing that may come forward like older person specialist types of housing. So we're looking at all of those. So when we come up with a view on whether they're viable across a whole range of different sort of scenarios in terms of types and mixes of residential development coming forward. Adam can go into this in a bit more detail, but modelling many different scenarios on that in terms of higher and lower build costs, different levels of affordable housing. So we're testing the wider policies of the plan that have a cost implication of them in doing that modelling work. As I said, we've gone out and got some good feedback from the development industry on the assumptions that we've been using, essentially asking them if they've got evidence of alternatives or if they have a view or want to seek a challenge on a certain assumption, for them to provide information to us to make a judgment on that. And we've taken on board information that's been received in the last couple of weeks on that, and looking at whether that has a bearing on the assumptions that sit behind the viability work today. So ultimately, all of this is about aiming to find a fair rate, a proportionate rate, and about a balance between what's charged and what could be accrued for the funding of infrastructure required for the developments. So just the last slide here. This is where we are going with this now, subject to you accepting the principle that it would make sense to go forward and bring more information to this group as it emerges over the coming weeks and months. This is a potential program of where we could be going this year under the scenario where you wanted to progress to examination and ultimately adoption of SIL. So really in the first quarter of this year, Adam's report, the findings of that report, taking that into consideration, finalising that report, doing an exercise. We can then do an exercise of doing some forecasting of how much money might come forward from SIL, from the development and the plan, and we would be able to bring back some figures on that, heavily caveated by the fact that those receipts are on a theoretical plan rather than real life of what would happen by way of those sites coming forward and speculative development happening as well. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is get to a point of the council agreeing to go out to formal public consultation on a draft charging schedule. So it's literally one page with the number of land uses and the number of rates that will be charged for those land uses per square metre. Go through a 6-week public consultation on that, analyse the consultation that comes back on it, see whether we need to tweak the draft charging schedule as a result of that, and pull together everything really for, again, very similar to the local plan process for the examiner. And then we get into the similar cycle of them having a look at that, setting a date for a hearing, having a hearing on it, and providing us a report on the schedule and their view on its amendment or adoption. So with a fair wind, that we could be in a position of being, ready to, subject to council approval, adopt SIL and go live with it a year from now. But that's subject to obviously keeping roughly to that sort of program, and as with the planning inspectorate on the local plan examination, availability of inspectors to do SIL hearings. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much for that thorough talking us through the process. Right, I've got Councillor King first, and then Mr. Winn. I'd like to make it.
Okay, thanks for that. Sorry, perhaps you can start by just saying who you are, because I haven't got a clue what your name is and who you're representing. Wayne Dyer, and you're from?
I'm Harbour District Council.
Wayne
Consultant.
Wayne Charles of the strategic planning team. Helping us with this.
Okay, so just that. Thanks for that, Wayne. So, but I didn't want to say. Yeah, you just sorry. So there's a few. You've answered a couple of my points I was going to ask. I know we've had presentations about SIL before. So a couple of kind of points of clarification. So if a site has affordable housing on it, does affordable housing provision pay SIL?
No.
No. Okay. So if we've got big developments and in the local plan, in the draft local plan, the policy proposal is 40% affordable housing on sites of 10 or more, then that means a very significant chunk, we'll go back to the example earlier, land south of Gartree Road, which is a new town bigger than Lutterworth, 40% of that site will not contribute to any SIL contribution that's required. So I can see why you might be talking about section 106 on site, but the problem with that site and I'm going to fix on that side, is there's a massive problem with the strategic road network. And the issue is that unless someone comes up with some money, all we're going to create is traffic light junctions. And that's the mitigation that the council has proposed in the Reg 19 that went out, is to stick a traffic lights at every road junction between the centre of Market Harborough that currently doesn't have traffic lights and the centre of Leicester. Okay, to essentially create a giant car park called the A6. Now, not in anyone's wildest dream is that really realistic, but that seems to be the plan. Now, a few weeks ago, before Christmas, the county council and Councillor Galton said, decided that actually it better do some work and actually look at the, what's needed to deal with certain strategic road problems that its work has identified, one of which is the A6 between the edge of OB and Market Harborough. And the problem with that is whatever the solution is going to require a shed load of money, which the county councils, the highways authority, and Councillor Galton knows this as well as I do, doesn't have that sort of money. So either the government's got to stump it up from its mythical tree of money, or it's got to come from developer contributions. Now, the current applications that are in at Great Glen and other places, the applicants are saying they are not proposing to make any contribution to any off-site mitigation measures that are required, and that's deeply concerning. So I'm kind of in from that, and what you said, kind of suggests to me that probably Urban and Civic proposal is going to probably suggest the same thing. So I just come back to something else. As you'll know, we've got a lot of applications circling out there at the moment and are actually in the system, way more than we actually need in the local plan period. And one of the issues I'm trying to understand is, so we've got an application that comes in, and if it is in before the SIL rate applies, can SIL then be applied retrospectively to that application, or is it SIL can be applied as long as the planning decision notice hasn't been issued? Which is it? Because I'd just like to clarify that. So I'd be very grateful if you could clarify that point. And I've got a couple of further points which I just want to ask about as well, if that's okay, Chair. Thank you.
Right, either of you want to take those questions? I think the first one was about affordable housing. Would you like to answer that?
On the affordable housing point, that's exempt and it always is. So if 40% is affordable, the net area of that delivered space will not be chargeable.
Wow, that's a big gap. So, okay, thank you. And what about the retrospective issue? Because we've got a lot of applications in.
Yeah, so I think that's a really important general question, not related to this site, but the whole district. What will be, if we adopt it, what will be the position on all the speculative planning applications? Is there a timing issue?
Yes, there will be, in much the same way as the local plan is at the local plan until it's adopted. Until a SIL charging schedule is adopted, the SIL can't be charged. If planning consents are granted within that period, they would not, you can't go back and dip into the pot afterwards. So essentially,
well, that explains why there's been such a big rush of them coming in and banging them all in, isn't it? So there's no, and they've known about that for months, that we were doing this, whereas some of us councillors didn't know we were doing this until very recently. So that explains why they're all accelerating their applications, even the draft sites. Got one in my ward that's done that last week for 580 homes. So just coming on then.
Sorry, can I just ask you a question now, Councillor King? Just a piece of work was done in Kipworth, wasn't it, a few years ago, about looking at cumulative impact in that area, or wasn't there a policy agreed to collect contributions?
There was, and I've got a meeting coming up in a couple of weeks about that.
Right,
to find out what's going on.
Where does that cover?
It only covers, well, they had a policy, and then they said it would cover certain sites which they had a schedule, and I can't remember the detail. It's on the website. I mean, the officers, I'm sure. We co-funded the report. District and county jointly funded it. I mean, I think it's 2016 or 17, something like that.
So you're pursuing whether that's still applicable?
Well, the county
have said your last comment about they don't want to pay anything.
Well, county have said, well, no, so what they're saying is they were, as I understand, it's in the public documents, which I've read, they say they don't see any justification for, that's the two sites in Great Glen, they don't see any justification for paying a contribution to that particular policy that's been adopted by both the district and county. There are other sites that are being slated for contributions. I've seen that, but I don't know. It seems to be. I'm not quite sure where that is with the policy. Maybe that's something we could take up at house. But I've got a meeting with the. We've got a meeting coming up outside of this elsewhere about that, because county are proposing to bring one of the things forward, but they haven't got all the money for the rest of it. And the question is, where's the rest of the money if they, and that's the question which we don't understand the answer to that at the moment. So that's why I'm saying if they're not going to make contributions off site, and we've got existing policies, but then that comes back to what you said, Wayne, was that you're going to be testing all of the assumptions in the local plan, i.e. I'll just take, you said about affordable housing. So presumably we're looking at if sites have a 40% affordable housing, which doesn't pay anything, is the deliverability of what's required for site X or the wider district infrastructure actually deliverable? Will we generate enough money basically to pay for the infrastructure that's required as a requirement of the local plan? And that's always the $64 question, I think, and that's what residents want to know as well. So does that mean then that particular parts of the local plan policy could then have to change if the modelling that you do shows that if we have model A or proposals A, whatever they are at the moment, they could have to change? Because if we don't change them, then the SIL and the local plan infrastructure delivery isn't deliverable. Is that a feasible situation that might occur then?
Well, I don't think there's any local. I don't think there's any local plans around the country with SIL in place where SIL funding raised supports all of the infrastructure required for.
Okay, so it's not going to raise all the money that's required. No. Okay, no, that's great. That's great. So the other question I had is, you've answered that one. You've answered that. Do employment sites pay SIL? And if so, is there a minimum size site that will make a contribution?
Yeah, that's tested in detail separately and is considered. All uses are considered.
We can give you more information on
that. Okay. In terms of making SIL decisions, you said there's the local priorities, and you went through that, and that's all interesting. And you then said there's a share of SIL can be received by parish and town councils. Yeah. Now, could you just clarify what is the share and how does that work? And is that automatic, or is that at the discretion of the SIL charging authority?
No, it depends whether there's a neighbourhood plan in place or not in the given area for the development. So if there is a neighbourhood plan in place, it would be 25% of the receipts.
And when you say that, 25% of the receipts for what? The site that's in the neighbourhood plan area?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And if there's no neighbourhood plan, it would be less.
15%. Okay. And is that just sort of parish councils? What about, because in our district we have a lot of parish meeting areas. Are parish meetings able to receive SIL payments or other?
I'm not sure what that is. Sorry, I don't know what. You have to have a body to actually receive.
So yes. So okay. So that's no then, I think, from what you.
Yeah, but I mean, in reality, they're not going to have much development because they're small communities and development's not directed there.
Well, just thinking about this land south of Gartrey, you have got a couple of parishes there which are just parish meetings, right? So you could argue. So that's a debatable point.
Okay, but just to complete that one, then we also asked the question about Market Harborough, and the response we got is that if they've got a neighbourhood plan coming through the forum, then that would be applicable for the 25%.
Yes, so the neighbourhood plan body that Yeah, okay.
Just want to put that.
Yeah,
on the
no,
record.
I understood that. So in terms of who makes the civil decisions then on where to spend the money, who decides that? What's the mechanism? Is that down to the council to decide, or is that laid down by the regulations as to how, what the body of the council is that decides that?
Charging authority, which would be the council.
Yeah.
You see, would have to, say how
We
much.
haven't got that far yet, so there would need to be a democratic process. But what we are saying is that there would be some resource necessary. That's right, isn't it, David, to manage this process. If we had a SIL, you would clearly need some officer to deliver it.
Okay.
Yeah, John.
We're still at the principal level at the moment, Councillor King. So what we're looking at is there's a
Okay.
process of the planning
I've
technical.
got that. Okay.
And then there's a process of governance and integration into the council.
Okay, and I mean, just quick question. Obviously LGR is going on. I mean, if LGR is happening, so does that, who becomes the charging authority?
Yeah, well, that's that one. It's binding on it's handed over. It's like everything that's planned
Just get
on the
handed
land,
over.
it gets
Okay.
handed over to
Okay.
the successor authority.
And then finally, the last question I got, sorry, there's quite a few, but if not all the infrastructure has actually requirements been defined in the local plan, just going back to my county highway, strategic highways thing, not all of that's yet been sort of finalised, then how can you test whether you can actually fund or what the ask? I mean, for example, say a bypass is needed somewhere, and that hasn't actually been determined yet, but say some work comes up in the next few months, and that says, yeah, actually, in order to make this plan, deliverable, a bypass is required, but there's a telephone number required of cash, then how does that get tested? How, you can't test what you don't know, I suppose, but how do you then re-look at it later? I mean, how does it work? Thank you.
Ultimately, the SIL process in this situation is hopefully looking to be dovetailed into the local plan process, but the two are still distinct from each other. So that we're not setting out at the start of this SIL study with an ambition to reach a sort of golden number. It's just testing based on the typologies we've used, based on the assumptions we've used, which are appropriate in the context of the district and the economics. What is the SIL that can reasonably be sought with a reasonable buffer to ensure that the development remains viable? If that happens to be enough to support the infrastructure, then brilliant, everyone's happy. As Wayne touched upon earlier, that's not a situation which often, if ever, happens. So ultimately, what the purpose of the study is to do is to establish a principle at the moment of, is SIL viable, to what level, what receipts may that generate? That's the sort of next step. But
It's just one mechanism to fill the pot effectively, that we let's see what the maximum rates are that we can charge
Yeah.
to get that.
No, I understood that, and but it won't fill the pot completely.
No.
No, I've got that. Thank you. Thank you for your answers.
All right, thank you, Councillor King. Mr. Winard.
Thank you for the accepting to have another comment from Stubden Newtown. Thank you so much for the presentation tonight. We were advocating in the submission we made for Red 19 that Harbour District Council should consider a SIL, noting that Charnwood Borough Council already has one. And at the time, there was some conversation around it, but I'm glad that this is moving forward. So I think that's positive. Just to a clarification question, you mentioned, I think between the two of you, you mentioned that section 106 and SIL are not charged twice to the developer. Am I correct?
no, not necessarily. You can charge both.
Okay, so that's interesting because also reported in our, we've done the detail look at, and we love spreadsheets. So we actually did look at the Aspen Verde report, which was commissioned by Harbour District Council on the viability of the various sites. And particularly since we talk about the land south of Gartery Road.
Apologies, is that the whole plan viability assessment?
Yes, it's basically your long report.
Not the current report.
That's right. So the page 86 of, we actually did read the 3,500 and something pages. that site was identified by Esplanade Verde as marginally viable, and I quote what was written in your report. And that's before having worked with the developer. Some people might remember David Campbell Kelly used to be a developer. He's now part of the WRA working with us. We've actually gone down to numbers from the top. Now, if you were to charge twice, and I was going to say that I thought I understood it's only charge one, but now you charge twice. So the modeling currently, which is marginally viable, expects a profit margin for developer of 17.5%. With the cost of raising the capital as it stands now, inflation on building material and everything else, a developer would expect a profit margin of 20%, which actually Oadby and Wixton have assumed in their calculation, but you don't seem to have. And that's with that profit margin, if you put 3.5% on top of that, marginal gap starts to go into it's not viable at all. The profit margin on 6% on affordable housing, which is a new calculation, currently developers ask for 15%. So now you can see your 40% affordable housing going down to what, 10%? Then you get down to the viability on basically infrastructure. All of this stuff, the Eco Town was actually pushed back because there was no transportation. Midland Connect came in 2018 with an express bypass, which was cancelled in 2020 because there was no business case. And now you're basically coming back with a development where the SIL, as we've just heard, is possibly not likely to be able to support the infrastructure. When we talk about a bypass, we're not just talking about Kidworth. The express was supposed to be about $1 billion, $1.5 billion. Since no allocation and reserving of any land, as we've heard through Leicester County Council over the last few weeks, has been made, this would be more like £3 billion. So in terms of infrastructure and creating all that traffic, which is on Dartbury Road, it just will not work.
We just
The maths do not work.
I've lost you. I've lost you on that last bit about £3 billion.
The maths simply do not work.
What would cost £3 billion?
To actually put the infrastructure which support the traffic that is going to be created.
And what is it that £3 billion would buy?
So the expressway was put forward by Midland Connect in 2018 as an expressway which would basically go to the east and south of Leicester. That was cancelled in 2020. No business case, no money. If an infrastructure of that nature were available, it would be believable that the transportation issues around and the modelling that's being done and actually has been done, which led Leicester County Council to say that this is an unsound plan, the local plan that you proposed. I cannot see under any circumstance how a developer already on the marginal side would actually countenance having a SIL on top of a Section 106. The viability of the site, it makes no sense. So I do not understand the strategy that's being proposed here. And if a strategy is poor, you have to revisit it pronto before the local community gets even more upset than what was the case about 15 years ago when the first eco-town was proposed.
It's not an eco-town. Okay, right. Thank you very much for your question. 15. You want to come back? I'm going to ask the director to come back because you've raised sort of wider issues than just SIL.
Numbers do not add up. That is the central point. They do not add up. It is already Esplanade Verde's case that this is a one-standing site. Now you add more cost onto it, and you start to do the maths again, and you find that there is no viability.
Okay. Thanks, Kath. Thanks, Mr. Willard. SIL, I think colleagues have said, will not fund everything. It's not something, in fact, it relies on there being a gap in funding for it to be chargeable. So that's an important part of the equation. 106 can be charged as well, providing it's not charging for the same land uses. So that's what we call double dipping, as was the phrase that's sometimes used. But speaking candidly, it may well be the case that there needs to be some additional funding from government. And we know this is a site that is being promoted by the government. It's an accelerator site. Homes England are involved. We don't know yet what that would look like, but it could be the case. But we can only, but what we are doing here is dealing with what is in our circle of control. What we're dealing with here is what's in our circle of control, which is looking at a cell and looking at section 106. We can't second guess what Homes England might do.
But the
I'm
plan,
just trying to be candid to help.
yeah, but the
help on
plan,
me.
the plan will have an infrastructure delivery.
Yes, the plan has an infrastructure delivery plan aligned to it, which is the plan setting out what it sees as being required to make that site, assimilate that site into its location and mitigate its impacts. Yeah.
When will that be then?
It will be working with the plan.
Okay.
It sits alongside, it's a separate document.
Yeah.
But it sits alongside and is a partner to the plan.
Okay. Do you want to add
I
anything?
just wanted to clarify one point on the question about whether you can charge still on 106. The answer to that is yes. I'm not for a second suggesting that we're advising that there's more and more and more and more and more. It's considering the balance. Where are you securing the funding from? And again, to go back to the point on whether it will fill the pot, it may not. The pot is as big as the pot is able to be through viability. That's a discussion that I'm not involved in and it isn't my instruction to consider. But what I'm not suggesting is the 106 is at a certain level and the sill just sits up on top and top and top. For one of the points that David mentioned, it would mean that you would be double dipping for one. It's where those funds are best secured. That's important. And that's what the sill concept is there for. The 106 can only be proportionate and directly related to the site in question. Therefore, anything outside of the exact remit of, take the land south of Gartrey Road site, for example, you could not take from that site. With sill, you could hypothetically take sill from the whole of the rest of the district and put it all into the land south of Gartrey Road site and its surroundings if you wanted to as a council. That's just to clarify that point on 6 versus sill.
Thank you. The math with spreadsheet, it does not work.
Yeah.
You said so. We said marginally viable.
Yes, but it depends what the funding sources are as a director. Okay. We've noted your point. Right, to the members, are there any other questions before I close this section? Councillor Borrell.
Can a developer get out of paying sill by saying that it's not viable, the site won't be viable with sill? I know they can obviously come with section 106, but can they do that with sill?
No, they can't. Once a sill charging schedule is adopted with a map of zones essentially or otherwise to set out where the charging areas are, that is then from the minute that's adopted, that's in place and you can't
So they're expected to build the sill into what they
you would have to, yeah, as a developer.
Pay for the land essentially.
Exactly right.
So that makes it better than section 106 in that aspect. They can't get out of it.
Yes.
So it's going, we know what they're going to pay.
Yeah, exactly.
And they know what they're going to pay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Councillor King.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So, look, I think, thanks the guys for the answers they've provided, been very helpful. But there's a couple of points I think which are worth just reflecting on. First of all, that sill can't be applied retrospectively to any application that's been approved. We all know in this room, members, that there are currently 14,500 units of housing that are one part of the planning system or another currently in here at Harborough, and that's increasing every week. So we're probably over 5,000 now that are in the planning system, actively. Given that we only needed 6,500 approximately net for the draft local plan up to 2041, that's an awful lot of housing coming forward. And the concern is, and I've raised this with officers here and elsewhere, is that most of these applications are only outline applications, means of access. They are the bare bones applications. And the reason they're doing that is so they can sprint through and get ahead of the sill. Now, if that happens, Chair, we will be left with a sill charge, but no money coming in. That's the bottom line. And that's deeply concerning, because then we'll be relying on site-specific Section 106 to deliver infrastructure. Now, that might deliver some infrastructure, but it's not going to deliver strategic infrastructure, because that's much more complicated, because it isn't just related to one site. And unfortunately, our local plan doesn't have the policy hooks in it currently to, I'm only relaying what I've been told, doesn't have the policy hooks in it to enable some of that strategic infrastructure to be captured. To be the funding to be captured, and for then that to be provided. So we're going to end up with all the housing pain, but no gain, quite frankly. And this is just confirming that view at the moment, because the problem is we're playing catch up, and the developers knew about it, and they've got in ahead of the game. And if they get in there, they get their applications in, and if there's some delay to the SIL getting adopted or whatever it is, then it's game over. And
yeah, I take your point, but I think what's given rise,
very high risk.
Yeah, what's given rise to all these speculative applications is the announcement by the government that our housing numbers have gone up.
I know that.
And suddenly overnight we lost our 5-year supply. That's why they're doing.
No, I appreciate that.
You're saying it's because we are going to bring SIL in. There may be an element of that, I don't know, but the planning applications were like that. We lost our supply, and now it's gone like that.
It's a combination, I think, of the two things. Well, I suspect.
I think if we had a 5-year supply, we wouldn't be getting the application.
Well, no, I know that, but but the SIL is financial incentive for these businesses to get their applications in and get them approved before it happens.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So we've covered SIL. As you can see, the work is going on. There's a timeline there. We've actually now completed all the open parts of the meeting. So we've got one item to deal with in exempt. So I'm going to move. Sorry, I did. Councillor James, you did have your hand up before I go into exempt. Did you want to ask a question? Yes, please. Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot you.
Not really, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to make the group here aware. On Monday evening, I attended the AGM of the town hubs, and obviously they've had difficulty with their neighbourhood planning because the funding was stopped. There's some funding available now, and there's more work to do. And they were hoping that we were expecting that they would be able to contribute fairly directly now into the local plan. But they're not going to be able to do that. One is perhaps ready, but the other 3 are not. And they probably have got about another 3 months' work. And I'm just wondering how their contribution, and they've done a tremendous amount of work, these volunteers, on their neighbourhood planning, how they can contribute to the local plan, given the fact that, we'll be going forward in March 2026. And certainly 2 or 3 of them will not be ready then, excuse me. And is the way that they can contribute to the local plan and put all their work and all the information they produce in there for consideration, whether they could do it quickly in a summary form, or whether they could, do a presentation or talk to the inspectors in November, I don't know.
So did they put anything in at the Reg 19 at all?
I don't think they've not submitted anything at all.
So if they didn't put anything in, the director will confirm. But my understanding is if they didn't put in anything at Reg 19, then no, the door's closed on putting anything in. Nor Councillor King raised this some while ago. If you don't put something in a Reg 19, you won't even be considered by the inspector to have a seat at one of the sessions. Well. He won't be sure. So the short answer is no, but the preparation of the neighbourhood plans is a separate process to contribute towards their plan. So my advice to them would be to crack on with the neighbourhood plan, because those areas that are cracking on, and fortunately we've got one in our ward and it's going to referendum next month. That's the best advice to give. Get on with your neighbourhood plan, because that will give you an element of protection, whether we've got a local plan.
Yeah, they will do that. Of course, we've got some funding now to do a bit more work on it, so they will push on with that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Well, just to reiterate that point, I certainly was asked about that by various places, and I have been asked about those that needed to redo their neighbourhood plans, whether they should get on and do them. And my advice was, yes, get on and do it. 1 or 2 have said actually they were told by officers from Harborough to sit and wait, And allegedly, and I'm only saying this, allegedly there was a meeting with parish councils some while ago where parish councils, it was intimated, so I'm told, I wasn't on the meeting, so I don't know. And they said that it was intimated to them that they should wait until the local plan was submitted before they did a review of their neighbourhood plans. I think I did raise it at the time, but it's just concerning these aspects.
I mean, obviously, we couldn't give parishes a definite number, housing number, until we got to the point of Reg 19 for them to plan for, because, you know, they have to be,
Sure.
what's the phrase? Conformity.
Conformity,
They have
general
to be in
conformity.
general conformity. But, and it's fairly well known, and I've certainly encouraged my parishes that they can request from this council an indicative number. Many did. And have been given an indicative number, which they can then use to start planning their
Well,
neighbourhood plans.
If I may just suggest, Chair, that may be a reminder needs sending to all the neighbourhood plan bodies that aren't currently active in reviewing their neighbourhood plan, that maybe you just need to remind them of this. Because I still think there's a number out there that think they're not able to do anything.
Absolutely not.
Well, I just think it needs reminding. They need reminding about.
Give you the example of Houghton on the Hill going
No, I
to
know-
referendum next month.
I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that. But I just think it needs reminding to the neighbourhood plan bodies that they can start the review of their neighbourhood.
You can do
plan.
that.
They don't need to sit and wait. And as you just said, if they want a number, they can get it confirmed, as you just mentioned. So I think that would help, because I am certainly aware of at least 2 parish councils, neighbourhood plan bodies that are just sitting and waiting. And my attempts to convince them to get on with it have not been positive. So thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Right, so we've covered the report on the community infrastructure level. So I now need to move item 8. We've got one item of exempt business, section 100A4 Local Government Act 72. Following suggested to be dealt with under the above legislation. To comply with the Act, following resolution needs to be passed. The report is exempt, not for publication by virtue of paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Having regard to all the circumstances, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information because it relates to third-party commercial interests. So as I've said before, this is mainly, it's your point earlier, Councillor King, it's not always best that developers know what we might or might not be doing. Anyone like to move that? Councillor Burrell, is there a seconder? Councillor Woodruss, all those in favour? Okay, so we will turn off the recording, go into